Good afternoon. In a few moments, you will have the chance to hear the views of four major players in the new economy. An economy that is increasingly digital, where knowledge creation is paramount and where the ability to innovate is a prerequisite for standing out. New Brunswick, despite its small size, has always been able to distinguish itself and innovate. Even before the internet became a major part of our daily lives, we were national pioneers with the creation of Service New Brunswick. We were also the first jurisdiction in North America to have a fiber optic network. And for the past 20 years, we have been working hard to be at the forefront of economic development, innovation, and growth. I must acknowledge the important work that Opportunities New Brunswick does every day to stimulate economic growth in our province. In a world where everything is changing rapidly and where we must constantly distinguish ourselves to remain competitive, it is important to know how to use our strengths and assets to their full potential. In fact, one of the key elements of our success as a small province that has allowed us to attract major players such as ExxonMobil, Xerox, IBM, FedEx, UPS, RBC, TD Insurance, and Unilever is the bilingualism of our workforce. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, the importance of a bilingual workforce and the Francophone market. New Brunswick, the only officially bilingual province in Canada where French and English have coexisted for centuries, has long understood the importance of using this asset. Let me take just a few minutes to give you some interesting facts that I'm sure will make you realize that French and Francophone markets are important aspects to consider in the new economy. French is the first language of nearly 8 million Canadians, including 1.5 million outside of Quebec. The Canadian Francophone economy represents 20% of Canada's total GDP, more than 130 billion in economic spin-offs outside Quebec, more than 430,000 Francophone businesses, including 70,000 in the Canadian Francophonie outside Quebec. According to a Conference Board of Canada study, bilingual workers outside Quebec generate 10% of Canada's GDP. It also notes that the GDP per capita for bilinguals is higher than for unilingual Anglophones in almost all provinces. In New Brunswick, 38% of our GDP is directly related to bilingual and Francophone workers. French is the third most important business language on the planet, just behind English and Mandarin. There are approximately 321 million French speakers around the world, from Africa to Vietnam. The GDP of the 88 participating countries of the IEFA represents 16.5% of the world's income, and 20% of the world's trade involves these countries. According to data from the UN and the Observatoire démographique et statistique de l'espace francophone, we can expect, according to the most conservative projections, that the number of French speakers on the planet will double by 2060, going from 320 million to more than 700 million. We are even talking about 1 billion by 2065, making French one of the languages with the highest growth forecasts. And while we often talk about an aging population, which puts a great deal of stress on our workforce, it is important to note that 60% of the world's French-speaking population is under 30 years old. By 2060, again, according to the projections, 75% of the world's Francophones will be under the age of 30, and 75% will live in Africa. This is enormous, especially when you consider the work that remains to be done to enable the African continent to equip itself with digital infrastructure worthy of the name. The possibilities are truly immense. As Minister responsible for La Francophonie in New Brunswick and spokesperson for 12 other provincial and territorial ministers of the Canadian Francophonie, my message is simple. Do not hesitate to hire personnel who can work in French and English. The Francophone economic space is growing and rejuvenating. The French language undeniably occupies a significant place in trade, cultural and tourism industries, media, digital technology, science, and international relations. It is a market that the actors of the new economy must consider. Now, I'll turn it over to a fellow New Brunswicker, Joel DeWolf, Strategy and Planning Lead in Investment Attraction with Opportunities New Brunswick, who will be your moderator for the session on digitalization and the new economy. Thank you, and have a productive discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Honourable Glen Savoie, Member of the Legislative Assembly for St. John East in New Brunswick, and obviously the Minister responsible for La Francophonie in our beautiful province. Also a shout out that was given by the Honourable Glen Savoie about Opportunities New Brunswick. We are the economic development agency for the province of New Brunswick and a proud partner with the International Economic Forum of the Americas. So we're very happy to be here at the Toronto Global Forum, along with some esteemed colleagues that represent, in Minister Savoie's words, pillars of digital transformation and innovation, and offering some unique perspectives both globally and from a more local New Brunswick level. So digital transformation is changing business and having profound effects, on both the workforce development and business. It's also providing new opportunities for innovation, for collaboration, and this is as true in my home province in New Brunswick as it is globally. Our distinguished panel will offer insights spanning this local to global spectrum and focusing on a more local level. In New Brunswick, we often tout our agility, an agile network, and I'm going to steal something from Dr. Mazerolle, who called it a stable three-legged stool of industry, government, academia, collaboration that can support digital transformation. So I'm going to start and put out there to each of our panelists to comment on this agility and associated insights and impacts, starting with UNB President Dr. Paul Mazerolle.
Thanks, Joel, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here talking about innovation and opportunities. Joel mentioned what's unique around the context in New Brunswick that enables agility at a high level between industry, government, and university. We're a very small province, 800,000 people thereabouts. It's about relationships, it's about access, it's about proximity, and it's about necessity. So we all look for opportunities for doing things differently, for innovation, for opportunities. The university has a role, but our ability to translate knowledge to impact, research to innovation, entrepreneurship is contingent on those relationships. And in a place like New Brunswick, having strong relationships with government, engaging with industry, and having the proximity for access, I think is part of the sparkle or the magic sauce which enables that to happen.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to turn over for insight and impact next to Jennifer Flanagan. And Jennifer is the President and CEO of Actua, a STEM education advocate here in Canada. Jennifer.
Thank you. So nice to be here with colleagues with ties to New Brunswick in some way. Everything that I'm going to share today really, although I live in Ottawa now and I have a very national mandate, it is all anchored in the experiences that I had growing up in New Brunswick, but also having my sort of first career experiences there. So, of course, I fully agree with Paul on the importance and the impact of that multi-sectoral approach to digital transformation. I'd add a fourth leg, and I don't want to debate with you on engineering, although I do have an engineering degree, but the fourth leg being nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations that are so critical right now in filling some of the gaps in digital transformation. The other important point to consider when we're having this conversation, as important as it is that we all work together, and I couldn't agree more, it's that we're all focused on how we're contributing to inclusivity and how the digital transformation is happening. So currently we know that we are at risk and are leaving behind massive numbers of people in this digital transformation. So we, as all of the sectors represented on this stage and in this room, need to make sure that in order for us to be successful in this new economy, that we have mechanisms to build that inclusivity into digital ecosystems. The great news, and for me as a longtime advocate in the space of diversity and equity, is that it's becoming an easier case to make the need for inclusivity because the research is so robust and so clear that the more diverse voices we have around the table in this space around digital technologies, the better the economic outcomes. So we know that businesses that have more innovative cultures are 6 times more agile and 6 times more innovative and have better business outcomes. So the importance of that fourth leg of the stool comes in when we're talking about having those voices come to the table around building these inclusive ecosystems, because at the end of the day, we know that digital transformation is really about people and about talent as much as it is about the tech. So if we have wonderful technology, it's going to eventually get stuck if we don't have populations that can adopt it and adapt it. And that's why we do the work that we do at Actua, which is working at the earliest stages of the development of this this digital transformation capacity. And I got my start in New Brunswick as a student, and Actua has grown out of that. We've been doing this for 28 years now, and that has afforded me the personal experience of seeing how much those audiences that are currently not represented in the space have to offer.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're making progress already. We're adding a fourth leg to the stool. Like that. Let's hear from Jeff Legier, president of Shoppers Drug Mart, on this.
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. So my comments will be centered around healthcare and healthcare transformation using, obviously, digital modalities, but also in-person care. And when we look at these type of collaboration, what draws us to a place like New Brunswick and the whole concept of agility and the three-legged stool or four is that when we're looking at transforming healthcare delivery, and we know that we're coming out of a pandemic where we've had some significant issues in terms of healthcare access. Shoppers has a large network of community pharmacies, along with our grocery store pharmacies that cover every community across the country. Over 85% of Canadians are within 10 kilometers of our locations. And there's a transformation happening with what the roles of healthcare players in the system are happening. Access to physicians in other areas has been a bit more difficult, and other players like pharmacists and physios and other ones are taking on more responsibility. So when we think about that, we obviously play in an ecosystem that is obviously governed by provinces in terms of health systems and health mandates. We think we can be helpful, especially when we're looking at, I think you mentioned knowledge translation. Research is excellent to help drive new insights and where to go and discoveries, but it's much more powerful when it can be put into action around policy and transforming what we know are acute issues. So for us, having all three at the table and having all three kind of engaged around the right problems and around identifying the right data to use and actually testing and figure out modalities is incredibly important. So that speed, we work across the country, and we certainly have found that in New Brunswick in terms of being able to move quickly.
Thank you for that insight, Jeff. Lastly, over to you at the end, Sheldon Miller, partner, Atlantic Public Sector Consulting, leader with IBM.
Thanks, Joel, and good afternoon, everyone. As Joel said, I'm a partner with IBM Consulting, and digitization and the digital economy is really at the core of our business. And I think, as we've all seen over the last couple of years, the acceleration of digitization of processes within organizations and service delivery, I think we see opportunity within that, but as IBM, we also see obligation. And as Jennifer said, leaving no one behind as we work to close that skills gap and labor shortage that exists in the digital economy today. Globally, IBM's committed to upskilling 30 million people around the world in digital skills by 2030. And we've got a number of programs that we're working, and that's something you don't achieve by yourself, right? It's working with an ecosystem of partners, with other businesses, with nonprofits, with government organizations, and with academia to achieve that. And looking forward to talking a bit about some of those initiatives this afternoon.
Thank you, Sheldon. So now I'm going to kind of go back to you, Paul. A couple of years ago in 2020, renowned Canadian business journalist and author Gordon Pitts released the book Unicorn in the Woods, How East Coast Geeks and Dreamers Are Changing the Game. And Paul graciously gave me a copy of that book, and I voraciously ate it up. And I encourage everyone to have a peek at that. It chronicles a couple of New Brunswick-based tech startups, Radian 6 and Q1 Labs. They had their origins from within UNB to eventual growth and sale for a combined $1 billion. So lots of lessons to be learned from there. So Dr. Mazerolle, I'd like to kind of lean on you to describe some stories of Radiant 6 and Q1 Labs. What do they tell us about Atlantic Canada's knowledge economy? What signals did these events trigger for digital transformation?
Thanks, Joel. It really is a fascinating story, and I do want to plug the book. Gordon Pitts did a great job at telling the story of the evolution of Q1 Labs and Radiant 6 and why it occurred, and really the legacy of those stories. They really recognize that in Atlantic Canada, we can punch above our weight. You need not be in Silicon Valley to have a good idea go from good to great. The conditions are there. Necessity, cybersecurity. I mean, UNB is well placed as having the first computer science faculty in the country. We had a bunch of individuals who were dealing with real problems, and it led to how an idea led to this avalanche of opportunity. So I think what it does, it recognizes that the conditions are ripe to build a knowledge-based economy in Atlantic Canada, in New Brunswick and beyond. That, as I said, you need not be in Silicon Valley. You might have to work a bit harder for the investment capital, but I think the world is shrinking all the time on that. But what this is reinforced is the conditions which allow these kinds of things to thrive. So problems that emerge around the world can also emerge in New Brunswick. Solutions can be New Brunswick based. You have IT talent, you have entrepreneurship spirit in a university, you've got the right conditions, the policy levers in government, you've got industry and community who want to be part of solving problems, and it can lead to new innovations. So from the university perspective, we've got a very strong entrepreneurship spirit through the place. So much so that Startup Canada listed UNB as Canada's most entrepreneurial university a number of years ago. But the legacy of that is about 180 companies in the last 10 years have come out of the university. So not everyone's going to be a $600 million purchase or acquisition, but we've got new things happening all the time. So for me, the lessons are we can do it. The ideas are there. We can have the talent, even though it's a global race for skills. The conditions are ripe to allow local innovations to lead to global companies. Having IBM Center of Excellence on cybersecurity in Fredericton is important. Same with Siemens. We have this large ecosystem, which is the legacy of this. And now we're looking to further expand the digital, transformative digital economy, which is cyber-enabled but digital-led. So I think I plug the book. It's a great book.
Great. So everybody should find that book. Ask us where to find it if you're looking for a copy. Thank you, Paul. Now, turning back to you, Jennifer, and teasing out something you had mentioned about being an advocate for youth STEM education. From a broader perspective, how do we foster development of the workforce of tomorrow while ensuring we respect diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So I love the example that Paul just gave in terms of, big things coming out of New Brunswick, and certainly the work that I'm now doing with a team across the country came from the experience of being in proximity to so many different communities, First Nation communities, rural remote communities, Francophone communities, urban. And I think what's critically important, and I'm super solutions focused, and we teach kids about solutions, but it's also really important that we understand the problem or the barrier that exists to building a more inclusive digital transformation. So, for example, in this country, a country that many of us are lucky to call home, one of the most diverse, one of the most developed countries in the world, we still have a massive issue around digital equity and technology equity, meaning that very large numbers of people don't have access to technology, so hardware and software. They don't have affordable, reliable, fast internet connection, and they don't have the skills to participate fully in that. And what that looks like by the numbers is, less than 50% of households in rural communities in this country, and we have a lot of rural communities, they don't have unlimited high-speed internet, less than 50%. So really important to keep that in mind as we talk about this evolution and all the work that we're all doing to advance digital transformation. Also really critical that we remember that as we bring those diverse voices into this ecosystem, that those people who have traditionally been underrepresented in the space of technology are going to encounter hardware and software that has bias built into it, and the potential is there for inequalities to be exacerbated. So we all know it. It's not a talk about why those problems exist, but it is critically important that we continue to advocate. And certainly, I mean, I now speak across the country about this, and I was heavily influenced in New Brunswick by Frank McKenna, who, when I was a kid, he's a former premier of New Brunswick and a massive cheerleader for all things New Brunswick, and used to say to me all the time, like, kiddo, like New Brunswick, you've got New Brunswick in you, you've got, all the skills and tools, and, stay here, go, come back. I mean, it's really, recognizing how important that influence is of that kind of context. The solution really is in removing the barriers. So much of digital transformation now is enabling companies to rethink about how they do their work, to reinvent themselves. And it's incredible to see, and companies like that and post-secondaries are on this stage today, who have really taken the opportunity to put equity, diversity, and inclusion at the base of that reinvention, right? So that new policies and new governance structures can actually be more inclusive. So the solution for the building that inclusivity really is to take that very local approach. So Actua, for example, works with 43 institutions, including the University of New Brunswick, across the country at a community level, one child at a time, working to engage them in experiences that build the skills and confidence that they're going to need in science and technology, but to participate in being the innovators who are sitting at the table for the next round of Radian 6. And those experiences, again, are super connected. So we work with universities and university undergraduate students who lead these programs. Programs are supported by corporations who help us to figure out what skills they need to see in the future of work, who support the inclusion work that we're doing in a big way, and who also then provide the networks for these youth to go off and find their first employment. So the key is to take those local experiences and bring them up into conversations like this to say, okay, systemically, what are the barriers and how do we continue to remove them so that the youth that we're working with today and keeping in that pipeline of digital skills, that they don't encounter the same kind of barriers that we know currently exist.
Thanks, Jennifer. That really jives with messaging that Opportunities New Brunswick uses in terms of positioning the province as a digital sandbox for innovation. And you can look at the province as big enough to matter, but really a microcosm of what is happening across the country and in a lot of places around the world. And we've successfully used that to really position ourselves well for energy innovation, cybersecurity, digital health. And on the digital health front, I'd like to ask Jeff Legier, as representing Canada's largest pharmacy retailer, over 1,300 pharmacist-owned locations across the country, why does Shoppers Drug Mart see the value in exploring new digital tools?
So why do we choose to invest from a New Brunswick perspective? So as I mentioned earlier, we view ourselves as a healthcare delivery company at its center. And whether it's in the pharmacies that we have across the network or clinics, and also recently acquired LifeMark, which is a rehab player that has national scale, we're in that mode to help deliver and help people live life well. What was interesting to us if you think about investing in New Brunswick and looking at local type initiatives, we invested $2.5 million with the McKenna Institute with UNB. I think it was the shortest meeting ever to contribute that amount of money. Frank was also there, Paul, and also Adrian, and it was a very compelling story. We made that investment. And why is we saw this as an ability to accomplish what we were looking at doing. We're looking at doing population health. We're looking at using big data around that. There's a beautiful center at UNB, the MBIRDT, Institute for Research, Data and Training. And it has a really beautiful snapshot of New Brunswickers from a socioeconomic perspective, administrative data, Medicare, all these elements. So our goal with the investment was, yes, around digital health, using big data, looking for solutions that can help translate that into meaningful change in the healthcare system. But at the core of it, we wanted to know what was going on. And this data set, in terms of looking at chronic disease like cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and the slant that we were interested in, because we also have a mandate through our Life Foundation to contribute about $10 million per year, or raise $10 million and contribute to women's organizations that are focused on many aspects, including shelter and including health and mental health issues, but specifically around solving women's health equity issues. We know that women are often underrepresented in clinical studies and often have a very different journey around chronic diseases. So at the core of the start of this initiative is finding out what those differences are. Is there a difference in terms of the experience somebody suffering from a heart event in New Brunswick, if they're male or female, demographic, where they live in north, rural, yes, there are lots of rural areas in New Brunswick, but also urban areas. So it's a nice microcosm of Canada. And then the next phase will be, once we discover that, is what are care pathways, how we can help, whether it's the healthcare system itself, whether it's physician-driven, nurse practitioner-driven, or other allied health professionals like pharmacists or physio or occupational therapy. We know that to fix this healthcare system, we really do need to call on all healthcare professionals to be able to practice at the top of their scope. But for them to do that, they need to know where to go, what are the people that are most in need, and where they're under treatment. So that's been, I think, an exciting start to the partnership. And obviously this will be one project. It'll lead to many, many more, hopefully lots of side discoveries. And hopefully some of these will be resolved through either innovation around predictive analytics, or also around certain apps that may be helpful in terms of self-screening or areas like that. We also have a digital health ecosystem at Shoppers, which we have an app out there called PC Health, which helps people navigate. So these are an area where if we find these discoveries in this environment, we can also help with commercialization too, which is an interesting partnership. So it's kind of a fun area. And once again, the New Brunswick and the agility at moving between government, industry, and also university to kind of have it founded in research, but implemented very quickly, we think are things that can kind of scale quite nicely, certainly across the country. Mm-hmm. And we have a network to do that. And then also perhaps globally in terms of where things are at.
A great example of the stool that we were referencing earlier, Jeff. Thank you. And I know we have other examples of that, and Sheldon can speak to those. Turning it over to you, Sheldon, we know that to take full advantage of the digital economy, Canada requires a more digitally literate workforce. And there's some rather alarming stats out there. It's estimated that over 42% today in 2022 of jobs require new tech-focused skills like analytics and design thinking. But double that number, 84% of current jobs are estimated to require at least some form of basic technical competencies. So this has obviously been exacerbated by the experience we've all lived through over the last couple of years with the global pandemic, and seeing some of those, the problem being exacerbated, the gaps not being filled, some unfilled positions that have resulted from that. So I'd like to know more about what IBM, what your organization is doing to build digital skills in the workforce, and why does IBM see it as important to really develop digital skills for the new economy?
Yeah. I guess I'd start by saying there's a problem, but there's an opportunity associated with that. I think the World Economic Forum identified that $11.5 trillion can be added to the economy by 2028 if we can close the skills gap, but it's not an easy task to do. So that's why I think we were so excited about the energy in New Brunswick, and specifically that the McKenna Institute and University of New Brunswick were bringing forward with the launch of the Institute last year. We were able to attend that and both feel the energy, but also see the alignment between what the Institute's trying to do and what we as IBM are trying to do, not just within Atlantic Canada and Canada, but globally to help close that skills gap. As I mentioned earlier, we've committed globally to upskill 30 million people, and through the partnership with the McKenna Institute and UNB earlier this year, our commitment was to upskill 40,000 New Brunswickers in digital skills over the next 5 years. And that's leveraging a skills build program and platform that IBM donates to organizations and governments and jurisdictions for that purpose. So the intent is to make it available free of charge, and it's able to provide micro-credentialing, just-in-time skills. So it's recognizing that in some cases the barrier to participate in the digital economy, or in simple words, get a job, to be part of the economy, might not be a 2-year program or a 4-year program. It might be a 6-week program or a 2-day program that's required to give you that specific skill that's needed to perform that function or task. And that's really what Skills Build is all about, is providing open access to citizens to be able to give them the right skills at the right time. And we're really excited about partnering with University of New Brunswick and Tech Impact in New Brunswick and other partners of the university to be able to deliver that to the citizens in New Brunswick. And that's just one of the things. And the challenge here is these aren't simple problems, right? So it takes, the saying was, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think it takes an ecosystem now to train a digital worker and get them to participate in the economy. So I think for me, being an Atlantic Canadian, that really excited about the energy and the promise of the McKenna Institute, and excited for us to be part of that.
Thank you, Sheldon. You might have noticed a little bit of a theme that's come up a few times with the McKenna Institute, and that hails back to our former Premier, Frank McKenna, of course, who was then ambassador from the U.S. And also vice chair of TD Bank, and continues to be a large advocate for New Brunswick. And he issued a bit of a challenge a little over a year ago, and put his money where his mouth is, and put $5 million into this McKenna Institute concept. And the government of Brunswick actually put in 10, and the goal would be 50. They surpassed that in September of this year. So a lot of great work, and a good model for how we can address some of these skills gaps, I think, throughout the country. And we're seeing some neat parallels in places like Calgary with dollars being injected from Rogers and others. So great to see that kind of activity. Back to you, Dr. Mazerolle. Through the lens of academia and as a comprehensive research-intensive university, what role do UNB and post-secondary institutions play in driving digital transformation?
Thanks, Joel. And just let me riff for a moment on Frank McKenna, who's a UNB alumni, I should say, and who believes strongly in New Brunswick and the digital transformation initiative. And Joel's absolutely right. Frank helped drive this, and these partnerships with these two gentlemen to my left is a great illustration of that commitment to partnership and Frank's enthusiasm to drive digital innovation and transformation through the province, in raising accessibility and bringing new partners to the table. But your question's a broader one, Joel, which is terrific. What roles does the university play to help enable this transformation? There's 3 or 4 things I'll quickly mention. One is in developing talent. And so that's a lot of domestic students. That's a lot more international students. It's also accessibility, as was mentioned, through the Skills Build program, making knowledge and information and data and skills more accessible to more people. Mm-hmm. As it relates to accessing domestic and international university students, we're in a global search for talent in Canada. We're against, the Russian, the Chinese, the Indians, the Americans, the Australians. So Canada has a role to play to attract the best and the brightest to be learning and earning and innovating in the high tech area, the digital innovation space. So developing talent, developing new ideas, the next innovation, the next cybersecurity revolution, evolution, could be through a university, could be through a think tank. So that's the other platform a university provides, where the new ideas, we're a testing ground, a sandbox, if you will, for dealing with problems, looking for solutions. This is enabled through partnerships. Our partnership with IBM, our partnership with Shoppers Drug Mart are great illustrations that we're stronger together, that a university can have impact through blue sky research, but it can have greater impact through its innovative partnerships, which are looking to translate knowledge, which are looking to develop combined solutions to industry problems, but societal problems. Also thinking about lifelong learning, professional learning, upskilling and reskilling workforces, but also really joining hands to say we are stronger together to deal with the challenges, be it in health, be it in economic innovation and economic development, be it in agriculture, be it in environmental challenges. So our role is not just about skills and innovation, it's partnerships to strengthen impact, but it's also about how do we inform policy and how do we work together with partners, government, industry, and community to ensure that it's not just part of a community that's thriving and succeeding, it's all of the community. So it goes to the accessibility issue that Jennifer mentioned. We're deeply committed to equity, diversity, inclusion, and truth and reconciliation. We call it truth and reconciliation, to ensure that this digital revolution and innovation and transformation is for the entire community. So that's where we see how we can make a difference.
That's insightful, and I think a really nice segue into a question for Jennifer. In terms of what you're seeing as the biggest obstacles or challenges to the demands of the workforce of tomorrow, and on the flip side, what do you see as some bright spots?
So, building on the initiative that Sheldon spoke about, I mean, there's no question that there's a significant gap between the skills that are in demand and required for success in the workforce currently and what is happening in the education system. Lots of bright spots, and I'll give you a couple of bright spots after, but there's still an ongoing disconnect, and we really do need to reimagine and reinvent a lot of what's happening in formal education to be more aligned. So some of the upskilling initiatives can have a trickle-down effect to some of the experiences that youth are engaged with as they go to school. I mean, one of the things that we, our whole organization is based on believing and knowing that one of the best ways to do that is through science and technology, or science, technology, engineering, and math. Excellent. When done well, an excellent way to develop both the technical skills, so no question the digital skills are an absolute requirement regardless of the future that youth choose to pursue, but it's also an amazing way to develop those more human, people call them soft skills, but human skills that corporate, the workforce generally is saying, these youth are coming out of university and they're missing basic life skills. They're missing some of the skills like collaboration and creativity and problem solving. And so with STEM, you can develop those digital skills, and then you can have youth apply them to real world problems. And this is what I love about what Jeff said is, they're just reimagining, for example, how you could use technology from a health perspective. And so that's an example of the kind of project we'd give to youth. So to a group of girls, for example, to say, what are some of the issues that you or your friends face, or your moms or your grandmas or your aunties face, and how could technology help to solve those issues? So it's getting them to think through real world problems and come up with solutions. I think two bright spots that I want to mention. One goes back to, well, they both go back to my experience and the beginnings of Actua in New Brunswick, one of and it was your predecessor, Paul, at UNB, who said, I have heard from several students, first-generation university students, that the first person that they ever met that went to university was when Actua's local group, they're called Worlds Unbound, when that program was in their community. They had never met anyone who had gone to university or who was going to university. So creating that pathway by post-secondary institutions investing in these type of outreach programs, then created that path into post-secondary. The other piece is the work that we do in Indigenous communities across the country. Again, really seated in the experience I had 25 years ago in New Brunswick visiting First Nations communities and I grew up in a very privileged, very systemically racist school system where there was no talk of positive, what was coming out of First Nations communities in a positive way. When I went there firsthand and saw that, the incredible amount of innovation and engineering and ingenuity that existed within Indigenous culture, it was life-changing for me, but it also is the basis of the work that we now do across the country in partnership with Indigenous communities. I have an Indigenous-led team that now works at the earliest stages with Indigenous communities, exposing them to science and technology and encouraging that. But that it's taken years, but over years has built up into a program that now includes, keeping those youth engaged in experiences that build deeper skills than providing them with meaningful employment. And through our corporate partnerships, those youth then can be employed and networked into corporate sector positions. So we now engage 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis youth every year in 200 Indigenous communities. And that kind of a continuous cycle where we could not do it without universities across the country. We could not do it without the private sector. It's one step in the reconciliation journey, but it's going to be imperative for us to fill those workforce gaps and bring that incredible ingenuity, to a wider platform.
Thank you, Jennifer, and I love the perspective from an engineer's point of view on some of the innovation that you've seen. It's crystal ball time, Jeff. I'm looking at you. If you were to look at the future of healthcare in a digital economy 15 years from now, what would you say that looks like?
It's a long window, maybe even just 5 years from now. So we've been on this journey to add what we view as what we call an omni-channel view of healthcare. So since 2014, we've been working on digitizing components like acquiring an electronic medical records company within our group. We actually have the single largest electronic medical records company. We've invested in virtual care, a company called Maple here in Toronto, a really great company. League is also another area that is the backbone behind our PC Health app. So all of those things would lead us to believe, obviously, that and this is not a novel thought, that obviously digital health access is here to stay. There's no doubt that it has a role. We all saw it during the pandemic, especially when physical opportunities were gone. The future element of it, though, is how do we drive better insights in the use of data, whether it's the data from daily living, from consumption, from experiences within the healthcare system, or genetics, or areas like that. So all those things, in our view, although it's hard to predict exactly how this will play out, should appear in a meaningful way, in a coherent way. And what would be our hope is that it comes in a way that gives you insightful thoughts and insightful actions at the right time to be a lot more preventative in terms of what's going on. That would be, I think, immensely helpful for our healthcare system. Prevention is certainly worth a lot more than paying on the end of it. So, and at the center of it, it needs to be in the individual's control. I can think about data. Certainly, everybody around it will be providing tools and ways of using it, but ownership over your data, ownership also over the insights and what to do, and for us to kind of go through this process and actually have some sustainability in healthcare, we need to make sure that individuals are accountable and responsible for their health outcomes. So giving those insights and actually having that with them, I think, will be very powerful.
Thanks, Jeff. There's obviously a theme of agility and collaboration kind of running throughout the discussion here. So I'm going to go to you, Sheldon, with something you touched on earlier, but just to tease out a little bit more on how you view the role of partnerships in workforce skill development.
Yeah, sure. And maybe I'll give an example of a program that we're involved with that highlights, I think, the opportunity for partnerships, and then maybe a bit of a call to action. But a program that we're involved with in Atlantic Canada called PTEC. So it's a program for high school students that allows them to receive their high school diploma, but also an industry-recognized associate's degree, and gain relevant work experience in digital skills while they're attending high school. And these are programs that historically have been focused on underrepresented communities. So to Jennifer's point, around communities that may not understand the opportunities that are available to them. We're running it currently in 5 high schools in Nova Scotia, a pilot program whereby students will complete additional training through their high school years, and then there'll be a capstone internship. I think there were 40 that did internships with IBM this past summer. And then they have guaranteed admission into the community college to complete a degree or a program associated with digital skills. So it's that partnership between business being willing to support through providing internships and providing human capacity to support these students through their high school years. The schools being willing to be flexible enough to adjust their programming, which surprisingly is one of the biggest impediments, because there needs to be uniformity in programming and equal access to everything. So trying to provide differentiated education to some students can be a challenge. And then the colleges being willing partners to allow direct admission for these students who may not otherwise think of college as an option for them. We're running the program currently with the First Nations community in Nova Scotia for the first time in Canada. And as you said, it's just being able to provide more access and more opportunities, because there's a certain segment of the population that's going to find their way to post-secondary education and be connected to well-paying careers and make that leap. There's a certain population that won't, and that's really what we're trying to focus on as we make those investments across the region. So I guess the call to action for me, for you, as you look at your jurisdictions, and I know there's a wide variety of jurisdictions and organizations represented here, is creating those ecosystems, creating those vehicles for partnerships, and bringing business to the table, bringing academic institutions to the table to make change for your organizations and in your jurisdictions, because I think there's a willingness to do it. The challenge is creating the means and the mechanisms. And we talked a bit about the McKenna Institute in New Brunswick. I think that's a great example, but that's something, and there's others that can be replicated across the globe. And I think that's where there's real opportunity.
Thank you, Sheldon. Great perspectives across the panel, and recognizing that we're getting close to time, but also realizing that we have all 4 legs of the stool here. So we had obviously Glen Savoie, Minister Savoie, speak on behalf of government, and myself from a Crown corporation representing economic development in the province. What could we, and I'm a firm believer in primacy and recency effects, so what are we going to leave the room with in terms of impact from your perspectives across the other legs of the stool? And we'll go in the same order, Paul.
Okay, well, on that issue of disruption, I do want to plant a big seed in this room, because there's leaders in this room and opportunities. But if I reflect on what we're doing as a university, what we're doing with our partnerships, what we're doing with community, what we're doing with with government. It's all very important for this digital revolution, digital transformation. But I think there's another challenge in front of us, and that's what I call it a national decline in public confidence in some of the administrative systems. So if you look right now at our education system, in the McKenna Institute, we have a fellow who's going to help try to make sure teachers have digital literacy. Because if you got a problem with your iPhone or your smartphone, you often give it to a teenager to fix it because us in the 40s and 50s are way behind this revolution. So that goes to upskilling and reskilling. But this is a broader issue of decline of public trust in healthcare, in the government's ability to deliver housing, policing services, educational services. So this digital innovation and revolution is beyond time in terms of the ability for large bureaucratic institutions to transition, including universities. So how do we all work stronger together to mitigate this decline in public trust in our public institutions is something we have to be very mindful of. So there's a lot of work to do.
Great perspective. Call to action there. Jennifer.
That is it's so critical and such a, because the work that I do is so focused on youth and, that the divide between what youth see as, their world, which, we view digital, like there's a digital world and there's a real world. To them, there is literally no difference. They do not understand that those are two separate things. I think the opportunity here, and hopefully you've heard my call to action, which is, how can each of you in the positions that you're in, with the networks that you have and the platforms that you have, continue to demand inclusivity and demand for changes to be made so that those voices come to whatever table you're at. And I would say, from a very optimistic perspective, one of the best parts of my job is getting to talk to high school students across the country, and they can see it. They see that they're not being prepared. They want to be better skilled. They are tired of an over focus on academics only, or academic standing. They get that they're not getting those experiences, and they are super socially minded. So there isn't a high school student across the country that I talk to that doesn't have some social angle to what they want to do in the future. Mm-hmm. And I think that is spectacular, and I think that will get at some of the challenge that Paul's talking about. And we need to make sure that they all have that opportunity to have a seat at the table once we get them skilled.
Fantastic. About a minute each. Start with you, Jeff.
I would go back to the collaboration that we need actually to help transform healthcare in Canada. We really do need to break down the silos that exist, whether it's in how public health care is delivered through different professionals, and have an open mind to be creative about the delivery because of the demand that we have. That is true in physical care across different healthcare professionals, but it's also, I think, true as it relates to digitizing the healthcare system, which we've had lots of different initiatives across the country. Some have been very successful, some have not been as successful. I think the ones that are successful are the ones that are actually true collaborations with people that are actually players in the ecosystem, like physicians, like hospital systems, that are really understanding the needs at the core of citizens or consumers or patients, and really kind of taking that focus as opposed to being so encamped in different perspectives like that. That will help free up great insights. It'll help free up, I think, dollars, and we do need those as our population ages, and we have to deal with those people as they've aged out and have issues that would need to be dealt with. So,
fantastic. Last word is yours, Sheldon.
I was just going to say, I think for us, we're really going to be focused on closing that skills gap in the economy. So both working with universities and colleges to tailor the programs to meet the skills that are needed for today and tomorrow, but then also trying to close that skills gap for those just-in-time skills that might be available to underrepresented populations or any of us that might need just that right skill at the right time. So that's our focus as we move forward.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're right on time, folks. Thanks a lot for your attention, and Enjoy the rest of the evening, the rest of Toronto Global Forum, and a round of applause for our distinguished panel.